As a divorce coach for men, I talk to a lot of guys and I get to see a lot of the legal processes that they go through. And unfortunately, one of the things that I hear about a lot are the mistakes that they make. These are not me saying that they're mistakes. These are men that I work with that look back on the legal decisions they've made and they say, wow, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe I did that. I wish I had been able to make a different choice then. So it's my hope that if you're going through the legal process of separation or divorce right now, that in this video, I can share these mistakes with you and that you can learn from them. And hopefully you can avoid some of the same mistakes that a lot of the men I work with have already made. So we're going to talk about probably actually three big mistakes I hear a lot of men saying they made during the legal process of their divorce. And then I'm going to give you the one strategy, the one area that you really need to focus your efforts if you want to avoid making those kinds of mistakes. So the two big mistakes I see men making are either giving away far too much or causing unnecessarily long and drawn out legal battles that get ridiculously expensive and disruptive and usually end up with a similar 50-50 split like they probably would have gotten if they hadn't gone into such a nasty fight, except now they've spent thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorneys. So there is a reason that these mistakes happen, and it's really important to understand what that is if we want to avoid making those mistakes. Because you might just be like, well, I'm not going to do those things. But the problem was that for most of the men I've spoken to who either did give up too much or started a nasty legal battle, it wasn't that they wanted to do it that way. It's that in the moment, they were so upset. They were so hurt. They were so angry. They were so afraid. They were so desperate that there was no other choice available to them. And that is the crux of this, because what causes men to make mistakes in the legal process is their nervous system being activated into a fight or flight response. If you're going through this, you know what I'm talking about. It's when you get an email from your lawyer and your heart rate goes up, or you see a text from your ex and your blood pressure rises and your stomach starts to churn. I've had a lot of men tell me that just getting those emails from the attorney, that can ruin the whole day, that they struggle to go back to work or can't get any work done. And it sets off this whole cascade of terrible thoughts, right? There's anxiety about what's going to happen. Am I going to lose my kids? Where am I going to live? What's my future going to look like? When am I going to be able to retire? What if I don't get custody? What if she does get sole custody? She's asking for more money. Right? All of that fear of the future and what it's going to bring starts. Usually there's anger. She's doing this. She chose it. You didn't want it. And here she is doing this to you. And it's having a dramatic impact on your life today and in the future. So usually there's a lot of anger. And sometimes it leads back to those other thoughts about how did we get here? Why did she do this? Who's she having sex with? All of that pain. And so it's incredibly disruptive, but it also makes a lot of sense because there's a lot at stake here, right? Your future is at stake, when you can retire, how much money you have, how often you get to see your kids. It's not surprising that your body goes into fight or flight. The problem is that fight or flight is not what you need to get a good legal outcome. And this is where men tend to go down these two paths, right? They either give up too much because they just want it to stop, right? It's too much, it's too painful, it's too triggering. I just need it to be done with and over with. And I've actually seen guys give up so much that they go from living beautiful lives to living out of their car, to couch surfing, to being totally broke. I've seen guys go from making multiple six figures a year in their businesses to working jobs for $60K because they just couldn't get past the emotional pain of it. So the emotional pain is very, very real, and the desire to make it stop can be overwhelming. You've probably heard me talk, if you've watched my other videos, about the suicide rates for divorced men. That's how extreme the pain is and how badly you want it to stop. So it's not that surprising that some men try to stop the pain by rushing through and ending the divorce process and saying, okay, just take it, take whatever you want, just stop hurting me. The problem with this is that it usually doesn't work. I mean, it works for a minute, they get some relief. But the source of the pain isn't gone. Right? The questions aren't answered. The hurt is still there. The loss is still there. And they still don't have great tools for dealing with it. And I actually see a lot of men who give up too much in the divorce getting really stuck emotionally. And often they stay stuck in some sort of a freeze state, depression, despair, overwhelm, sometimes for years. So that's not a good path to go down. And the other place that fight or flight response can take you is to fighting. And a lot of men pick battles in the divorce because they're angry, and they're understandably angry. But the problem with that is that it's expensive, and usually it doesn't change much. Most divorces end up in a 50-50 split, whether you do it on your own in mediation or you go in front of a judge. It's not always the case, and I know some of you watching have had horribly uneven divorces. So this is certainly not a rule, but it is the most common outcome. Custody, finances, that things go through a 50-50 split. And so when you pick these fights, it tends to it really just makes the lawyers richer, gives more money to the lawyers and less for you and your ex-wife to divide. So those legal battles can get long and drawn out, and honestly, losing money is the best outcome of them. The worst outcome is if you have kids, because now you've just drug your kids through this horrible legal battle. And heaven forbid they actually have to testify at some point or talk about which parent they want to live with. The damage it can do to your kids is brutal. But a lot of men make that mistake of getting caught up in that legal battle. And it's because they're in a fight or flight response, because their nervous system is so activated and they're fighting for their lives, it feels like in that moment. So there's something important for you to know about fight or flight. It is a survival response coming from a very primal part of our brain, the limbic system. And it's meant to deal with an immediate threat. So I'd actually like to share with you something that somebody who really studies this stuff wrote. So this is Emmy Golding, who's the director of psychology at the Workplace Mental Health Institute. So they were studying the impact of stress on workplace performance, particularly among lawyers, interestingly enough. So Golding says the limbic system is the first part of the brain that develops in utero, and it's wired for survival. It's there to keep us alive. It doesn't care about well-being, and it's not wired for complex decision-making. So that's interesting, right? It's just about staying alive. It's not about happiness. It's not about well-being. It's about not dying. Golding goes on to say, if I'm in the jungle and I'm under stress, which basically means I'm under threat as something's about to attack me or eat me, our brain doesn't sit there and calculate all the pros and cons of a certain situation. It just goes, there's a tiger, so you need to run or freeze or get something to fight it. The trouble is that the evolutionary advantages of stress relate poorly to the modern workplace. The emotive, primitive response remains, but there isn't a large, scary animal in sight. And this is so true of your divorce, right? That email comes, but the divorce isn't even happening right now. We're planning and preparing for something that's weeks or even months down the road. So the last thing Golding shares in the study around lawyers, Golding says that lawyers may like to think that they're more rational, sensible, and logical, but lawyers are human and all brains work the same way. When we're impacted by stress, that emotional system overrides the logic system in the brain. This is what's happening when men make poor choices with these legal decisions during divorce. Their logical brain is being hijacked by the emotional brain. And there's two more things that limbic system, that fight or flight response does that you should be aware of. One is it narrows your vision. This is literal. Like our peripheral vision reduces because we're focused on the threat. If there's a tiger about to attack me, I'm not looking at the pretty flowers or the monkey in the tree or the creek behind me. I'm looking at the tiger. Okay, so our vision literally narrows, but studies have shown that our thinking actually narrows too. All of our focus is on the source of the perceived threat. Right, so we're not seeing the bigger picture. We might not even be seeing the impact that our decisions are having on our children, not really taking that in, or on other people, or even on ourselves. We're just focusing on the threat. She's dangerous. She's attacking me. I'm going to get her. I'm going to fight back, or I'm going to run from her. And we don't have the broader vision to see the impact that those choices are going to have on us, on our future, and on the people around us. And so time is also impacted by this. Fight or flight is a now response. I need to be here now while this tiger is attacking me. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing next weekend or next month or next year. I'm here now fighting for my life. So fight or flight also puts us very much in the present moment and makes it hard to consider or really think logically about the future. Freeze is even worse. When we're in freeze, the future ceases to exist. And there's some fascinating studies that suggest that when you're depressed, you literally lose your ability to conceptualize the future. It just stops existing for you. And these responses, fight or flight or freeze, they're autonomic responses. We don't choose them. We're not controlling them. So when your nervous system is activated, your ability to perceive or plan for the future is reduced. Your access to the logical, rational, analytical parts of your brain is reduced. Your vision is narrowed, so you can't see the impact you're having on those around you. Right? All of this is happening from the inside out. And in that moment, as all of that's happening, if you have to answer your lawyer and make a decision about your legal strategy, odds are you're not going to make the best decision because you just don't have access to the right parts of your brain. So this takes us to the strategy. If you want to avoid these bad outcomes, if you want to avoid giving up too much or causing unnecessary fights, or the third thing that I see happening that I mentioned at the beginning of this video is that men will not be able to communicate well with their ex-wives, and everything will have to go through a lawyer, but they'll also be really triggered. So they'll pick little fights over little things like who's going to get sentimental objects or what to do with family photos. And these discussions that they could sit down, find a solution, suggest it to their ex and talk through it rationally, they become these arguments that go back and forth through the lawyers, and at $300 or $400 an hour, just those email conversations can end up costing you thousands of dollars. So if you want to avoid all of these things, the one place you need to focus is on getting your nervous system out of fight or flight. Period. No amount of good legal strategy is going to help you, because when you see that email from your lawyer and you go into fight or flight, if you answer that email, then you're not going to make good decisions. You're not capable of it. And if you're in mediation and you're triggered, or you're in front of a judge and you're triggered, all of the moments where you need to make decisions are going to be high emotionally charged moments. So your number one priority, if you want to make sound legal decisions, has to be getting your nervous system into a balanced, regulated state. So I've made some other videos that go into great detail on that. The best one to start with is the 9 stages of divorce for men. It goes through 9 different emotional stages that I see most men experiencing in my coaching practice, and it gives you specific exercises to work with each stage. If you want to go even deeper into it, I've made a wonderful free masterclass that goes into the nitty-gritty of how to work directly with the nervous system to calm it down, even in these really triggering situations. And you'll find a link to that masterclass in the video description below. All right, thank you for watching. Do that work on your nervous system. Don't make these same legal mistakes. And thank you guys for being with me. I'll see you in the next video.